Alright, so on today's 1980 Corvette project, what I'm going to be working on is, I don't know if you can see it down in here, right about where my finger is the fuel pump. I'm not a big fan of it. You can see what they did is they ran that heat shielding around the fuel line, but it constantly comes in contact with all sorts of stuff. So what I want to do is pull that pump out of there, block that off, put an electric pump on. This motor sucks a lot of fuel. Alright, so right there's my wrench. I have a long extension and a wobble at the end. I was trying to find a place to set the camera so you could see it, but you can't really, so yeah, so basically I just have a long extension with a wobble so that I'm on the nut, and I should be able to start backing that out. Let's see, can you see what I'm doing? Oops. Alright. Alright, one up. Now, let's get to the other one. Not as much room on that side to get my hand in there to turn the bolt. Still not enough, let's see. Alright, how about this? Okay. Alright, so next thing I gotta do, I'll put this boot back on so I don't forget it. There we go. Alright, so next thing I need to do, I've got the bolt pretty much all the way out. So you can see that down there. See it sticking out right there? Alright. Alright, I got both bolts out. Might be hard to see, but that's it. It's out. It's just hanging. So now I got to figure out how I'm going to fish it out of there. I thought it would come out through the top, but I'm thinking I'm going to have to go underneath the car to get to it. So, alright, give me a second. Alright, so with a little bit of wiggling, I was able to pull it between the lower control arm and the frame. And now it's just hung by the fuel line, which I'm going to disconnect now. Alright, so this is our fuel filter and fuel line. Trying to see which one of these is actually the right one. I don't have a line wrench, so worked pretty good. Like I said, I had a leak, so shouldn't have any fuel. I haven't run into any fuel yet, so pretty sure I don't have any fuel. Look at that, completely dry. This fuel filter wasn't even bolted to the frame, it was just hanging there, so that's a wonderful thing. So, and I want to put it someplace not so close to the exhaust. So I'll find a new home for this, one that's easier to get to, probably up on top. Maybe the top of the fender bucket would be a good spot for that. But yeah, I will end up replacing that line and get that fixed. Alright, so the next thing I'm going to do is feed this up and around the frame. so I can pull this pump out. Because I don't think if I pull on this, oh, it does move. Okay, sort of. Let me see what else I can get. All right, so I fed the whole hose up to the front of the motor. Hopefully it'll come out now. Alright, one fuel pump. Alright, now that I've got the pump out of the way, I've got myself a Summit fuel pump block-off kit. That's the number I'm using. It looks like that. It's got these lines. It's like the cheapest one, it's just flat. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to clean up the surface, put a little Permatex around the outside of this, and bolt it on. It might be a little hard to see, but I got it back in there. Actually, it was a lot easier than I thought it was, because without the pump in, I can get to both bolts at the same time. I don't know if you can see that. I can see it a little bit better. No. So I was able to get both in. I put some Permatex around the outside of that. Let's see, there you go. Now that's probably a better look. So now all I got to just do is sink them down, and it's good to go. And just like that, both bolts are snugged down, and it is good to go. Now I can move on to another project. The next project, I believe, will be the fuel pump. So I will need to dig out my fuel pump and then crawl into the back of the car and see what I have to work with. So this is a fuel pump I'm going to be running, this Summit 7 to 4 psi. So I'm going to mount this close to the tank, and this way I won't have to worry about all of that extra stuff. See, I can put the fuel filter up here on this fender and then wrap it all the way around. So that'll work out pretty good, I think. Alright. Alright. So there's not a whole lot of room to get my hand up above the tank. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to spray some penetrating oil on all these bolts that are holding the tank and the tank subs back together, and the bolts holding these exhaust tips in, and let it soak for a day or two because they've been on here for a while. Alright, so while I was letting the bolts on the bottom side of the tank soak, I went ahead and pulled the 4 screws that hold the cover for the gas cap off. I pulled the clamps off. I've loosened up this line. Tried to loosen up these two, but I really don't have a good angle to like push on them, so they'll probably have to wait until I drop down the tank a little bit, then I can reach in there a little bit better and be able to get to them. But yeah, I'm pretty sure. Sounds empty. Alright. As you can tell by the pile of nuts and bolts, I have loosened the exhaust, removed the bolts from the tank support on both sides. Now the tank is just more or less sitting up there. Not really sure what it's sitting on because it's not connected to this thing at all, as you can see. So I'm going to use a bungee cord to pull that back up out of the way. I'm going to get my roll around jack up underneath here just in case it's heavier than I think it is, and that way I can move it. Alright, with a bit of wiggling I was able to get the tank to drop down a few inches. Now I can get my hand in here to pull these 2 lines off. So after a bit of finagling, there's my gas tank. Finally got it out. I could not get my tank out because the exhaust ends here were pushed right up against the body, so I couldn't fit the tank between it. So I had to drop the whole exhaust. Luckily, it was 1 bolt at the end, 1 bolt there in the middle, and then the 3 bolts up at the front on each side. So it literally took about 15 minutes to drop the exhaust. I was hoping that I had the room to do it without dropping the exhaust, but that's okay. So what I'm going to do is they make some reusable copper wave gaskets for the header collector, so I'll be buying a set of those. That way I don't ever have to worry about replacing them ever again. It might be hard to tell, but this blue line is our feed line for our fuel. I'm assuming the silvery one is our return line, and I'm assuming that one is a vent, because it's awful small, and it runs down the driver's side, and I'm not exactly sure to where. So, but our feed line has a junction right here, so I can unscrew it and maybe put it in, but it also has another junction right here, right next to where the previous owner had wired in for something and just left these two wires here. I have a whole mess of wire up in the front that actually is the other end of this, and I think I will use this for the power for my fuel pump, and I think I'm going to mount the fuel pump somewhere either on top of this rail or maybe on the inside of the rail.